Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome back to the Windsor Time podcast. I am your host, Noah, and I am joined by Ben. How you doing today?
Doing great, man. I'm excited about today's topic.
I am. So this is an interesting topic. We're kind of coming from the perspective of we're both obviously enthusiasts. You've been in the industry a lot longer than I have. And as a retailer, I think you're going to have a lot of interesting insight here.
I am. Probably some that like goes against the grain a little bit too, I bet. But
Yeah.
we'll see.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and grab our wine.
Yes.
Our studio host so graciously provided
Cheers.
us with. Cheers. This is a natural wine, isn't it?
This is a natural wine. I admittedly don't even know.
Well, it's got some nice legs, and this isn't a wine podcast, so we're not going to dive in there. Yeah. So, let's jump into it. So I think where I want to start is let's talk about the last few years and kind of how things have blown up rather, and then before then what it looks like, and then where you kind of think it's going. So as a disclaimer, this is obviously not financial advice. We don't really have to necessarily say that, but this is just our opinions.
First of all, I don't know what we said. We're talking about watches as investments, or the perception of watches as investments.
Sure.
And I think it's a super important topic, especially if you're someone who's starting out in the industry and you read a lot of big headlines, you see a lot of crazy auction results, and you hear about specific watches that are going for crazy amounts of money over their MSRP. You ask yourself, why am I not in the watch game? Because I can make lots of money.
Yeah.
But that is not what it's all about.
No, absolutely. And let's start off at the inception of all of this hype. I think we can both probably agree the Paul Newman Daytona that sold for $17 million, when that watch was new, it was only a few $100s. I think that's really where it kind of kicked off. Would you agree?
That seemed, as much as there have been big auctions, and Patek Philippe has always been record-breaking numbers at the vintage level of some major pieces, but that specific Rolex Paul Newman Daytona auction seemed like it was the first time you were seeing headlines and articles in kind of outside the normal realm of watch blogs and watch magazines. It seemed like it was everywhere, and it really felt like it brought, not that watches weren't in the spotlight, but it suddenly brought this whole breadth of new clients in a way into our industry.
Absolutely.
That was my take on it.
Well, and I think, let's kind of first say, unless you're Paul Newman, your Daytona is never going to be worth $17 million. That's the first thing, really set the expectation. And, it'd be interesting to kind of hear your thoughts on this. I look at watches as a place, well, first off, I look at it as a hobby, right? I buy what I like, but the added benefit, because these things are expensive, is I try to, again, within what I like and what I enjoy, buy pieces, not as investments, but as value holds to where, if I want to move on to another piece, or God forbid, I just have to have the money and I'm in a pinch, you do have the comfort of saying, okay, hey, here's a watch to get me out of this pickle. Kind of, how do you position watches in your collection?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you first said, where you're buying a watch because you love it, you enjoy it, it is something aesthetically that, appeals to you. That is the key. Mm. There is obviously some confidence and some, factor of this thing. If I do end up selling it down the road, if I trade it down the road, I'm going to have enjoyed it for years and then get out of it and not have lost money. That idea of losing money, I guess historically with buying jewelry or watches, you always felt like kind of like a car. The moment you drove it off the lot, it's going down in value. But the ironic thing is, even a car these days, it feels like you can drive a car for a year or two and lateral it as a trade and do okay. But I think drilling down on that, the idea of doing okay or making money, it should not be what this hobby is about. And no. I really think one thing that is amazing about the hobby is the value holding side of it. Mm-hmm. But looking at it as an investment starts to open a whole can of worms and drive it in a direction I think is unhealthy for a lot of people.
Well, and with the amount of market volatility and people strictly buying into a watch because of the trends, I think that's unfortunately where a lot of people got burned. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, the rose gold olive dial day date. That was something, because of speculation buying right before the shows, people, again, I think had a lot of regret in buying a watch at $75,000 that they thought was going to go up to $90,000 Whereas if you're just genuinely buying that watch because you enjoy it, not that the value isn't important, but you're not going to get burned if it doesn't sell later on for what you think it's going to sell for.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the watch brands have become smart, and they're very smart in the first place, but they're very strategic, might be the wrong word, but they're thoughtful about what is the true intrinsic value of this watch, and what is the market going to do with it. Mm-hmm. And I think the market just got a little bit out of whack for 2 or 3 years here by far, and we've seen things come back down to reality to a degree, but there's still a sense of I hate to use the word hype, but there's still mm-hmm. hype behind a lot of things.
Sure.
But to your point, those rose gold watches have, or gold watches in general, have come back down quite a bit. But I still think there's this, this thought process that these things are going to do well over time.
Yeah.
But I like to think of going to do well over time, not in the sense that you have some endpoint where you're selling it. I like mm-hmm. to think of you just feel that the thing that you have bought has held its value.
Sure.
Not that there's this idea of buying and selling and trading all the time, which is unfortunately what a lot of new people in our hobby have kind of gotten themselves caught up in.
Sure. Well, and I think brands like Patek and Rolex are doing a really phenomenal job with stabilizing those values. Not only necessarily, they're not limiting supply. I think they're producing as many watches as they reasonably can, but they're doing their due diligence at the AD level to ensure the right people are getting watches.
That's exactly right.
So they're trying to cut off flippers by doing, again, due diligence. So, where is that watch going? They're tracking it, who's sending it back for service. Different things like that, I think, are going to, over the long term, not hurt the value of any watches, but keep them at a reasonable and sustainable level long term.
There's kind of a double-edged thing, too, because everyone wants a certain, let's say everyone wants a certain watch and a certain brand, but rarity is part of the value holding of these watches in the first place. So if if they're all of a sudden overproduced, then that rarity factor comes down and value naturally will come down. So there's this fine line that these brands have to look at as in terms of production to keep everything rolling.
Well, and I think that's a great point to really dive on to what we're wearing today. So we have two somewhat rare watches, one that is sentimentally worth a lot, and then another which is, again, compared to the original price,
correct,
a great long-term hold and something to wear and enjoy. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're wearing?
So I have a it's crazy to think that a watch that was born around the same time I was as vintage, but
neo vintage,
neo vintage, but a let's call it a vintage Tudor Submariner, with snowflake hands, with kind of like a blue to gray bezel. I want to say it's reference 94110. Don't want to butcher that. But just a super cool watch from, I believe, 1981. Something that I love, that have it on the bracelet, have thrown it on an Erica's NATO strap or fabric strap, just because I think it breaks it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And it is one of those watches that I want to say, I don't know the exact MSRP in the early 80s, but I mean, it's far off of what it is now. And I mean, literally a little bit more than the strap it's on at this point.
Right.
At that time. And it, at this point, it's a much more valuable watch. But that's over the arc of time and holding and value, things all, inflating to a degree.
Yeah.
But it's not something you're buying and trying to flip for making 3 times your money, which you see these days. But
absolutely.
How about you? What do we got?
So a lot of sentimental value here. This is the first Carolina Watch Club piece that we did. So this is the Nomos, rather. I'm all over today, thinking about his Tudor still. This is the Nomos Club Campus Carolina Watch Club Limited Edition. Has Carolina Watch Club obviously down here at 6 o'clock on the crown and on the back as well. Was this a run of 35 watches, I want to say?
That sounds correct.
Yeah,
and
so
really cool, because I mean, a few elements you said, as opposed to made in Germany, it says Carolina Watch Club. It's just some very, very small things that we were able to do with Nomos that was a really, really fun and, like you said, sentimental piece that kind of set the bar at a different level for Carolina Watch Club.
Absolutely. And, that's putting your money into a watch. This is never going to appreciate a crazy amount, but on the sentimental side, it means so much. And because of that rarity, it, who knows, maybe it'll be worth something. Someday.
But I mean, it is worth something. It's just not something to look at
monetary,
like a mutual fund. It's got this, this just to all of us who were a part of it, something very special, you
Yeah.
know, which is what watches are all about. you
Sure.
know. Before we started the shoot here, we were talking about things like watchcharts.com or people that are actually tracking the trajectory and essentially trying to predict futures in watches and what they think based on things being discontinued, things like that. And I think there really is a market for this if you want to look at it as something that, if you want to look at it as an investment in that way, these things will go up and down and you would be able to trade and buy and track them like an investment. But I think that, you know, it's all about the experience, and it is all about, you know, being a part of these brands. And when you start to look at these things outside of, you know, as just a commodity or just something that can be traded, you start to lose all those factors, you know, the emotional factors and the whys and why are you buying this other than making money?
Right.
And it's just got to get away from that. In terms of the future, it really remains to be seen. I think, as I was saying earlier, the brands have become so cognizant of the fact that a lot of people are kind of gamifying this industry that I think they really are going to be, you know, trying to do everything they can to make sure that these watches are going to the true collectors, or at least the enthusiasts, or the first time buyer, the person who just got their doctorate and can't go out and get a watch,
Right.
you know, because, you know, Joe down the way is trying to sell it for 3 times as much, and the market's dried up on that thing. So it's, yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see.
And, you know, I think it can also be a case-by-case basis, right? So I think you have to be very careful. The thing I hear far too often from people is, oh, well, on Chrono 24, it says blah, blah, blah. You know, I think you really have to do research for yourself. Go to your local, if you're lucky enough to have somebody like Ben, AD, somebody who's actually transacting with these watches, and say, hey, you know, where do you see this watch that I have going for? I think, you know, we talked about buying watches a lot. If you are on the selling side, you have to do your due diligence of what is actually selling. In my experience with Chrono 24, it's always going to be, you know, at least 7 to 10% above the true market value, which isn't factoring in what you're selling it into somebody for. If you are doing, you know, a dealer, if you're doing peer-to-peer, that's great. But you have to remember that dealers have to make money too. Yeah. So, yeah,
and
what do you think?
I think there's a lot of faux or false, you know, ads that are kind of in some ways inflating a lot of watches. So if you have, let's say you have 25 listings for a particular watch, you might have 17 of them that are just stock photos that have prices, you know, ask prices tagged to them that are not reality, as if you were walking into an actual trade show trying to trade a watch with someone else for something else. You might be 30 or 40% off of that price. I mean, it totally is so specific to the situation and the watch. You know, I think it's amazing to me. I'm going to go a little different direction here, but it's amazing to me how often someone comes in the store, excited to meet them, you know, new client, I've never seen them before. And within the first 30 seconds, they're talking about the price point of the watch they're trying to get and how much more it's going than retail. And shockingly, sometimes that is very frequently why people are, you know, at least what has caught their attention the most about the watch. And I will often say, well, you know, outside of, you know, the value of it or the price of it, what is it you like about the watch? And I am surprised that sometimes people don't really have a direct answer. I don't specifically like it because of this color. I don't like this, you know, the history of the brand, that I may not even know much about the brand.
Yeah.
I think in some ways it's been good for us as retailers, because I mean, in many ways it's been good for us because it just puts so many eyes on the industry, because there's so much attention on the watch industry right now because of how crazy things got the last couple of years.
Sure.
But in other ways, it's putting this just, I don't know, you know,
it's an odd pressure.
Yeah.
Especially on the retailer side. And, you know, I just, again, like we've said a few times, I don't think that's necessarily the right way to go about it.
Yeah.
Just because of the monetary value of something, you know, I get it's a way to potentially make a quick buck, but especially if you are interested in collecting long term, if, you know, I'm a new customer and I'm coming in telling you how I'm going to buy something from you and then go next door and sell it, well, that's just not setting up a good relationship with your authorized dealer for a long-term relationship. It's hurtful for you as a small business owner. It's hurtful for that person because they're now, you know, jeopardizing their chances of, you know, a relationship, a friendship, you know, something. if you're just trying to take advantage of the other person.
And I think that's the key word, is relationship. And unfortunately, our industry has become very transactional versus relationship driven. And it used to be, hobbyists that were in it, and there's always a transaction involved. I mean, you still have to buy and sell something at some point.
Sure.
But it has become so transactional and so about the dollar or the other foreign currency, whichever nation you may be in. It's become so transactional that sometimes those relationships have taken the back seat, and that's just not healthy for any industry. Yeah. So I think we need to get back to the relationship. We need to get back to, why is the individual, what relationship do they have with the brand they're trying to purchase, other than wanting to buy the watch because of its financial value.
Absolutely. So I think you have a lot of really great points there. Something I enjoy as a younger guy, I'm still learning about finance and kind of how to set up different investment and things. It is important to remember these are expensive pieces and it's an expensive hobby. I don't necessarily think it is bad as a value hold, with market volatility. I had, unfortunately, a lot of cryptocurrency in the past several years. It is cool for me to know that I can, at the end of the day, park money on a watch, enjoy that watch. And then, when the time comes, if I don't enjoy it anymore, I can sell it and potentially make a couple bucks.
Totally. And I think, buying a watch is not like buying Ethereum or Bitcoin, where you're going to have these huge ups and downs that look like mountains and canyons. I mean, you're going to have ups and downs in its value holding, but it's just, the trajectory up or down within a few degrees, as long as you're not buying completely crazy town on something that's way overhyped. But if you're buying something at a reasonable value, that's a great brand and a great product from a great person, you're going to do well, and you're going to be able to, quote unquote, get out of it if you need to, and do great and roll into the next thing and feel good about yourself as an investment. Yeah.
Well, and if it goes down to zero, you aren't left with nothing.
You're still wearing it.
You're wearing it. Awesome. You have it. It's a physical thing. You can enjoy it.
Absolutely.
And you can enjoy it even more, maybe knowing it's worth nothing. So we talked a lot about investing in watches. Let's dive into some watches you can buy right now. They're in the shop that we both really enjoy. So what do you have today?
So I brought a watch that I am super excited about. I feel like I'm excited about every watch we bring in. But this is in a way, a sentimental watch to me, even though it's in the shop. This is an Omega Seamaster 300M, a little bit later generation than my personal one that I mentioned, I think, in our original episode here. But this is a cool piece from 2010. It's from the 2010 Vancouver Olympic Winter Games.
Very cool.
So it's got this kind of wintry feel. It has the Olympic rings on the back of the seconds hand. And it's actually important to me because I briefly worked for about a year and a half with Omega in New York. And this watch came out right at the same time as I was launching and working in this Omega boutique. So it was something that was physically in the case 13 or 14 years ago that I was selling, that I remember near and dear to me. And strangely enough, this was sold out of our Winston-Salem store in 2010. And it just looped back around to us here 13 years ago. Or 13 years later. So it's kind of a cool piece. And at the time, it was one of the very few Omegas with a red bezel. So it was kind of a unique piece.
And again, that is something that has held value. I would say it's probably appreciated.
Totally. It's appreciated. It's not something where someone bought it and they're making 5 times their money. But they bought it, enjoyed it, sold it for as much, if not more, than what they originally paid. And now someone else is going to get a cool watch.
Absolutely.
For similar money.
And it's a unique piece. It has a lot of cool
super
things.
Unique.
Yeah.
Super fun.
Absolutely.
How about yourself? Cool. What do we bring today?
So, Rolex, Omega, those are the big ones. So I have picked out a Rolex Datejust 41. And what really stuck out to me, and maybe we can put it up on the screen. Did you ever watch SpongeBob?
From time to time.
Yeah. So there was an episode where he was perfectly smooth. And that is what this Datejust reminds me of.
That's so
It is
funny.
such a cool watch, but you just... And maybe you see more of them than I do, but you don't see a ton of smooth bezel Jubilee. Typically, I've seen it on the Oyster.
Yeah. You rarely see someone speccing that. Yeah. I mean, you will see it I don't want to say we see it for stock because actually what's coming in is generally something that's sold and spec'd for a client, but you rarely see someone spec a Jubilee smooth.
Yeah. Stick to
it's out there, but it's not as frequent as Jubilee fluted and obviously Oyster smooth.
Yeah, no, but very cool watch. Especially if you're trying to get into Rolex. Datejust is hard to go wrong with. So cool. I think we've had a really great discussion here. A lot of awesome topics. Hopefully, you guys found some value in it and insights. So anything else you want to touch on before we close?
No, I think that's it. I just, it's all about the relationship, and it's all about value holding, and these things are investments, but don't get caught up in the hype.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy the hobby, and cheers. Have a good one, and we'll see you guys next time.